For the artists, for the passionate. Welcome to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast, or welcome if it's your first time. I am your host Jade Black and today I am joined by another indie author. Could you introduce yourself please?
Yeah, sure, and thanks for having me, Jade. Happy to be here. So I'm Scott J. Moses, and I'm mostly a literary horror author. Can't seem to get away from the more existential grief themes, so just sad horror, really, for now. We'll see how it goes.
Honestly, though, that is right up my street. That is the stuff I really, really love. When I properly got into reading, back in the day, I sort of started with horror, and also, like, really sad, really grim horror. Like, that stuff is so good. So, like, it's great to have you on, because this is the exact sort of stuff I like to read. So that's just really cool. And again, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Of course, likewise. Thank you.
So the first thing I like to ask writers, just because I think it's really interesting, is what your approach to writing is. Are you a plotter, a pantser, something in between? Where do you sit on that?
I guess if we're talking like black and white, I'm a plotter, but it's a very loose outline. Like the outline I begin with is rarely the outline I end a draft with. It's very malleable, just change as you go. But essentially I'll have there's a point A and there's a point B, and then I just sort of pants how to get there in a way. Just have random bits of dialogue written down and certain character movements, but it's very vague, I guess you could say. But I think I technically would fall in the plotter camp, although I've got a foot in both teams, I think.
I mean, there is an increasing term of use that's planster, and I think that probably suits you to a T by the sounds of it. It seems like it's a really common approach, something like that. I've heard a lot of writers say almost exactly that on Twitter and in podcasts and all these sorts of things. There's a follow-up to that I have is, do you end up writing everything in chronological order, or do you jump around?
Yeah, I have to write, or I don't have to, I could do it another way, but I prefer to do chronologically, because you'll get an idea, and usually for me it's the climax of the story, and if I were to write that without having built up to it, I don't think it would hit as hard. And hitting those milestones of scenes you've been wanting to write for it could be a year even, just these nice little goalposts. Not that everything else is boring, obviously you don't want that. But I have to do it chronologically because, drafting, you're telling yourself the story, at least in my opinion, getting to know your characters and stuff, and I have to see it all the way through first to even have a skeleton to begin to work with, They say, at least for me, got to fill the sandbox with sand before you can start building castles, You ever heard that saying? But how about yourself?
No, I'm exactly the same on that one. I have to be chronological, and this is something I sort of learnt the hard way, in a sense, because back when I was sort of new in my writing career, I thought, I will experiment. I'll experiment with plotting, I'll experiment with pantsing and franken drafting and all these different things and, see what works, which I think was absolutely the right thing to do at the time, but it did leave me with projects where, one in particular where you said you had the idea for the climax, it's that's one that came to me. I had that. I had the climax in the end and something in the beginning, and I wrote those scenes in that order, and then I just didn't know at all what to do with it. And I found that writing chronologically, because I do a lot of stuff that's very character driven, it helps keeps the characters consistent and the character development a lot smoother. And with the project I've been writing at the moment, I've sort of ended up franken drafting a little bit, just because the first draft had so many holes in it that I didn't realize it had because my maths was completely off. But that's maybe a story for another episode at this point. but it's still, like, the first draft was written in chronological order, and I'm filling all the gaps chronologically, and so reminding myself of things as I go to try and keep that same approach, because I find that works so much better for me.
I've heard a lot of writers do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it saves time in edits. Big time, at least for me. I like my first drafts to be as tidy as they can be. And editing is then quicker, because I've just found that to work better. And when I try to do things the other way, I think things end up more stilted. But
Sure, I hear you. It's almost like starting with, some people call it draft zero, where they just just vomit it up, really, and then go. So yeah, doing it your way probably does save a draft, or 2 or 3 maybe, like just having it good and tidy as you go.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that, but I respect people that can.
I mean, everybody's process is going to be different, so I know there's one person who writes their full book out, then opens another window side by side and just writes the whole thing again. And that works for her, and it's like, I don't get that at all.
That's terrifying to me.
But, like, if it works, it works.
Yeah, if it works, it works.
There's no right or wrong way to do these sorts of things. That's always why I love this question, because you hear such unique approaches to it. And that's just really interesting to me.
I've heard many answers too. Actually, everyone we've talked about, someone has told me as well. So, yeah, as long as you're writing, doing the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to ask, why go with an indie press?
Good question. I think all paths are, of course, valid. There's no hierarchy or anything. But,
absolutely.
I think, like, I cut my teeth just putting a book out during the pandemic, right when that went down. Something to fill my time. I've been writing a lot of short fiction, so self-publishing was great, just total control. You can just get it out there quick and all that good stuff, which is great. I found I really enjoy indie because there's a lot of grunt work with self-publishing. Like, a lot of logistics, and I wanted to just write. It's cool, like, conversing with the cover artists and stuff. That's fun and great. But then there's, like, formatting and stuff, and it's like, I don't hate it. I'd rather be writing. So, just the right indie press just can bring a lot of that to the table and allow you just to focus on story. And they, a good indie press will have marketing and publicity, and it's just a nice marriage. I am in the query trenches now, trying to go the more traditional route, just because it's always been something on my list. So I'm like, why not go for it? But Shortwave Books is re-releasing our own unique Affliction, and they have been, like, phenomenal to work with so far. They just let me write and send in edits, and they do the rest. It's been great.
Yeah, I'm the same with indie press. I considered self-publishing for a long time just because I didn't think anyone would pick up my books as much as anything, because thriller is particularly hard to get moving, and it was at the time I was querying. I think it's a bit better now, but at the time it was like thriller was in a rut, and I thought, well, no one's going to pick this up. But then my dream house opened up a contest and said, hey, these are the sorts of things we want, and it was so perfectly written. I was like, I gotta go in for this. And it's for similar reasons to you, in the sense that formatting in particular, like, scared the death out of me. I was like, I respect people so much who do formatting for books, because I dread to think. I don't want to touch that. No, absolutely not. But I'm the same with, like, getting, like, the work you don't want to do. Like, I don't mind doing the marketing stuff. I actually do that for my house, and I really enjoy that, which I don't know that I've mentioned on the podcast before, for what it's worth. But a lot of other stuff, like, for me, it was editing. That was the main thing where I was like, I could probably do with a hand with that, for the sake of all, like, the weird corner case grammar rules and semicolons and things like that, because I'm not going to know them all.
Sure.
So it's just, I want to be proud of the thing I put out, and there's no shame in asking for a little help with that.
Not at all. I think it's wise as well. Like, I'll edit and revise usually about 4 to 5 drafts before sending it to a reader, and I don't think it's clean. You're too close to it. So, in my opinion, I think you need that outside opinion to be like, hey, there's a typo here that you've gone over like 7 times and missed. That happens to me all the time. So,
I mean, for the most part, with me, with having edit processes done, because I have had that with a short piece, it is just the little things that you miss. It's sometimes just like bits of language that, because if you can't tell from my mess of an accent, I'm British, and some of the words well, that makes one of us, but sometimes the language doesn't always translate very well, so finding words that, and it sounds a bit like I'm not trusting my readers at points, I'm aware of saying that language doesn't confuse people, but like American and British English is sometimes quite a different thing.
Sure.
And it's just the really odd little corner cases that they add up.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So let's talk about our own unique affliction. So tell me more about this book, introduce it.
Yeah, so I guess the pitch, if I can remember, it's been a while.
No worries.
Yeah, it follows a roundabout 200-year-old vampire who's just becoming disillusioned with eternal life, doesn't find much meaning, and if things continue on and on, she's essentially just like, what's the point? She misses warmth in general, life in the sun. It's just her kind of grappling with that more existential thing that, we as humans, I think a big part of what gives life meaning. I assume you're human, you could be a vampire, I don't know.
I do not wish to disclose this information.
That's fair. But, we as humans, this all at least ends in a way that we know it eventually, so I think that makes everything more meaningful. And there's a quote in, I'm rambling, so stop me if I'm rambling.
No, it's cool.
It says, like, you're born twice. The first time you're born into this world physically, and the second time is when you realize you're going to leave one day, and that's when life really begins. So that's essentially what the novella boils down to, just someone who is immortal, battling those kind of ideas, I guess. And there's a lot of blood at points.
That's really interesting as a sort of take on vampires, I think, because I don't think that's a subject that people dare stray that close to. A lot of the time it's like the potentially really grim nature of immortality is not something that people talk about. And I think it's just a really interesting topic because it can go so many ways. And I think it's interesting as well to have a sort of vampire story where the vampire is actually like the main sort of POV character. Because that's quite rare from what I've seen, is it's usually the person who discovers the vampires and then interacts with them, not necessarily the vampires themselves.
Sure, yeah, I really enjoy, I won't go as far as to sound haughty or whatever and say, like, I like flipping tropes on their heads or anything, but I do enjoy the point of view of the quote-unquote monster. For example, the novel I'm querying, to keep it semi-vague, it's a consensual possession novel.
Ooh.
So you're in the point of view of the ghost who is actually possessing the person. I guess I'll hold that up. But I like that POV of, like, what is normally demonized. I like trying to humanize the monster. And, if you can be sympathetic for a vampire that's just, like, eating people, I mean, I don't know. I think I've done my job.
That's really interesting, though. I love that. This is why I love, like, a lot of indie books and indie press, is you get those books out there. And in a lot of trad circles, I mean, particularly with certain houses, the circle becomes narrower and narrower of what they accept. And you lose out on, like, just really interesting, unique stuff like that. And obviously some trad is not like that and very open and has all of this interesting stuff, but indie press is great. I love indie press.
I agree. Like, I don't want to generalize. I have a lot of friends and work I admire in the trad.
Oh yeah, same, absolutely.
But indie, you can just get so weird and so off kilter, and even if, like, a big house wouldn't go for it, like, take Eric LaRocca, for example. Things have gotten worse since we last spoke. That's a crazy, weird indie book that just took off, and now trad is like, oh, people like this. So, just interesting. I don't know if they necessarily would have gone for it through the traditional agent submitting it to them, but seeing that the people wanted it, I don't know. I think there's a huge future in indie for sure, especially as the trap houses shrink. I think indie's going to become a big player if it isn't already.
It helps more people get more different stuff out there, and having more diversity in storytelling that's just a beautiful thing, I think.
I agree. It's pretty punk rock in the world.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it is actually, thinking about it. So what draws you to telling this story? You've talked before about sort of sympathizing or making relatable the thing that's usually demonized and doing a new spin on it. Is there anything else that draws you to books like this?
Books like this in general, it's hard to say, It's almost like asking a spider where it gets its web. It's just in them. I can't really, I don't know, I've just always been drawn to sad songs. And I've had I wouldn't say maybe bouts with depression and on and off, but it wasn't even because of that. Just even as a young kid, I was always drawn to the sadder Disney movies. I was just like, oh man, Bambi's going through it. I'm gonna like this one, or The Fox and the Hound or something. I don't know. I don't know. Just always been drawn to the more melancholic stuff. I think it's made me. I'm 34 now, and that's just real life, in my opinion. I think to be born as a human being, I think a synonym for human is just loss. Human being, losing being. We're gonna lose people we love. We're gonna lose. Life changes. Certain chapters close, others open up. I know I'm rambling, but I don't know. I've just always been drawn to that type of thing. I will say with this story, I was in a very bad place, mental health wise. I was dealing with some undiagnosed kind of OCD.
Oh wow.
Which is very on the level now, but I had no idea, and pretty depressed. So this, I never wanted to end it all or anything, but I sure as hell needed some more reasons to live, not to get heavy, but I just didn't enjoy life. I was like, if I got hit by a bus the next day, that's fine by me. I'm not going to go out of my way to do that, but it happened. And now I just see life is such a gift. So this book really helped me just get out of my own head and get back into my life, pretty much. Which is a bit more heavy than maybe you were wanting, but I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, given this is a podcast about horror book, and you talk about grief horror right from the beginning, I think this is one of the things I love about dark literature as a dark lit author as well as a reader, is it does allow you to explore these sorts of themes and feelings in this incredibly personal and also gritty way that I don't think you really get in quite the same way in other genres, and I think there's a lot to be said for that as writers and as readers, and I do love that.
I agree.
Yeah, and horror and grief, that all goes together, and I'm with you on the whole, well, being human, you're going to lose things, and you're going to lose people, and having those sorts of stories, I think that makes a big impact.
I agree. It's there's a saying, it's choose your pain, essentially. In the West, I'm not walking around thinking about death like some morbid person, but I am mindful of it. Man, it's a really nice day today. This is great. The sun's shining, it's warm out. And in the West, we kind of just try to shun any babe and pack old people in homes, and no one visits them, no one sees them. I was just scrolling around Instagram earlier, actually waiting for this call, and there was a comment of I think it was Jimmy Carter cast his ballot for the vote, the American election coming up next month.
Gosh,
and
yes.
They put a picture of his face, and he's 100 years old. Obviously, he looks old.
Yeah.
And people were like, this is disgusting. Why couldn't you just put a mailbox here? And it's people are so afraid of just that concept of aging and dying, when that's part of the ride. You're born, it's gonna happen. And I don't know, it's just weird. I think we could do better in the West to just be more open to that, because in other cultures it's just an accepted thing. It's that's part of life. I don't know, I'm rambling again. I think I'm very caffeinated, so apologies in advance, or not even in advance, we're in the middle now, but apologies.
I mean, no worries. This podcast goes on tangents of all kinds all the time. Like, if you're new here, hope you're enjoying the ride, because this is just what it's like. That's just kind of the deal. But I wanted to touch on what you were saying about aging and all of the sort of passage of time stuff. And because your MC is immortal, like, how do those two things phase together in this?
That's a good question, right? I mean, that's because I was writing this from a place of it's going to sound strange, but a place of hope when I was at my worst when I was writing this, because I was like, this does end one day, so I'm going to like really give, like, some people think life is meaningless, which I don't think that's the case, but like, if that is the case, then like it makes it all so much more meaningful that we're here. Like, why not take advantage of this like beautiful life that just, I don't know. And I was like, what if someone didn't have that, not out, but like that hope, like they're like, hey, this is just it forever, like you're going to lose everyone always going to be changing with the times, having to readapt, and just someone who like couldn't let go of a chapter of their life, which in Alice Ann's case was her human life, and just wants to cling to something that's never going to come back.
So I want to talk about the title of this book. So I think you sort of touched on a bit that it references immortality and what the nature of that can be like, but the way it's phrased I think is really interesting.
Well, thank you. There's a point in the book where Alice Ann's she's held captive and being starved of blood, so she's very weak. And one of her captors says, like, for us humans, our affliction is death, but for you, I think it's life. So, it just goes back to the mortality thing. In the West, we like to shun that part of life. And for Alice Ann, she really needs a perspective change on her existence, but she just thinks life is a drudgery. She just misses her old life. She's essentially just trying to hold on to something that's already gone, her human life, but for, multiple human lifetimes. And I don't know, but the perspective change that she may or may not have, and I think that we need to have as well, is like there are two truths to life. There are many more, but there are two I'm going to mention, at least that I think are a thing. Like life, of course, largely happens to us. We can't control who our parents are, where we're born, a lot of things, race or creed or anything like that, maybe, anything like that. But we also do have a lot of agency in our lives, and we can steer our own lives in certain ways to a point. So, it just basically boils down to that conversation where her captor's generically just saying, it's funny, like we loathe death and you loathe what we love. So that's kind of the dichotomy there, I guess you could say.
That's interesting. And did this title come easily to you? Did you know that that's broadly where you wanted it to go in the beginning, or?
Not really. Actually, the first chapter of this novella was a standalone short story. I just thought the story was done, and that was that. And that was originally called Hunger Pangs, which was the working title of this novella for a long time, just because it had to deal with longing and things like that still. But yeah, the story just had legs, and then I remember drafting that chapter, which is also titled the same thing, Our Own Unique Affliction. I was like, I think that's the title for the book. It just said more than Hunger Pangs did, but it just came, how you can be writing and then your brain will just be kind of more like lubricated and open to new ideas, and it just spat it out. And I was like, oh, well, great, that's better than that.
It's great when titles sort of come just so organically like that. I mean, it's pretty rare for me. I think I have to work really hard at titles, but the odd one that comes naturally, it feels great. I do love that feeling. And stemming from the title thread, I wanted to talk about the cover art for this book, because it's one of those covers where you look at it and go, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah, so it was originally published with Darklit Press, which I won't speak too much about because there's a lot of controversy there.
Yeah, it's best to just not at this point. I mean, if any of the listeners at home want to find more out about that, to be honest, I don't really know where to point you. I mean, you can search something like Twitter, but yeah, I don't think either of us are necessarily experts, and I don't know that either of us necessarily want to talk about it or in detail, but yeah, that's a whole entire thing.
Yeah, it's probably best to leave it there, because I think it's in the works there that I probably won't have any part of. But
yeah, I don't want to interfere with anything that's ongoing.
Exactly. So, needless to say, they allowed me to choose my own cover artist. So I had chosen to go with George Katronis, who's out of Greece. He did the cover of the anthology I edited, What One Wouldn't Do, which is essentially a grief horror, grief crime kind of anthology.
Oh, this rings a bell, actually. I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, most people know the cover, and because he's an amazing artist, so most people know the cover before they recognize even the book I'm talking about. But yeah, it was a dream to work with him. He made it like this old kind of like 70s noir horror movie poster, and I just gave him like the most abstract words. Like the note I sent him, I look back at it now and like that makes no sense me reading it back. But he killed it. He crushed it. With Shortwave Books, it was a new press, and they wanted to do their own thing with the cover. So we were able to hire Matt Seff Barnes. Matt Seff Barnes. I always forget the Barnes. He's an amazing artist as well, and his was actually a pre-made cover that a friend of mine was just scrolling Twitter and was like, dude, this is Alice Ann. Like here, it's essentially like this. I know you can find it on Twitter and Instagram, of course, but it's like this living girl looking down on like a dead, milky-eyed version of herself looking back, and I was like, that's pretty perfect. So we were able to just nab that cover, and Matt has been great to work with as well. But it just kind of all came together. I don't know, it was really, really just cool. But I'm very appreciative to both artists, and I love both covers, but I've just gotten really lucky when it comes to the cover art. That's for sure.
Cover art is such a unique part of a book. Like, it can be a lot of work to try and figure out exactly what you want. I think it's really interesting meeting someone who came across a pre-made cover like that, because I've seen a lot of people make covers for books and say, you can buy this if you want, but I'm not sure I've ever come across someone who's actually done it. So it's interesting to hear about that process, because that's actually really cool.
Yeah, it was wild, because normally I love to collaborate with the artist, but I feel like we had almost collaborated. It was like perfect. It was just a weird universe thing, I guess. Like my friend is honestly a big supporter. He read a really early draft of Our Own Unique Affliction, and he just was like, "Hey man, I think this is on. It's for sale. Like this might be the one." And I just can't thank him enough. Thanks, Justin, if you're listening to this, because I probably wouldn't have seen it otherwise. So
that's really awesome. Worked out. That's really cool. So, what did you decide for snippet readings, by the way? Are you going to read the short story and the snippet, or just the snippet, or what?
I think I'm going to heed your advice. I think it's best to read from Our Own Unique Affliction, being that it is coming out in January.
Okay.
I had like this Halloween kind of story I was going to read, but I might just film that for YouTube later, or Instagram later. But I think I'm just going to read like the first page or two of the second chapter, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, I mean, read whatever you think is best. I'm never going to dictate on that, because no one knows your story better than you. So you've prepared a little snippet for us, and I'm really excited to hear it.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to read just the first couple pages of the second chapter of Our Own Unique Affliction, which is titled Of Stars and How They Die. Get a sip of coffee first, though.
That is the most important thing, is the coffee before the reading.
I agree. So I love it when it rains, when it's cold out. Not that I feel anything other than cold, but you get my meaning. Make no mistake, though, all that UV's still coming down through the shroud of clouds above, despite their obscured, uncaring gaze on us all. But it makes the extra clothing, the hoodie beneath my leather jacket, the gloves, the beanie, less conspicuous. As for the shades on indoors and lack of pluming air from my all but useless lungs, well, that's something else entirely. See, on gray, overcast days, I can walk with them, pretend I'm one of them. And sure, it's risky, but if those clouds decide in unison to dissipate, if that sun peeks out from behind them, spilling out and over me in this quaint Virginian cafe, well, that wouldn't be so bad either. I clasp my hands around my coffee, wincing from the piercing headache I've had since waking, and getting them more and more lately, and twist in my chair to face the melancholic street with its brick-laden sidewalks. The blurred rain loosed from the sky cascading down the storefront's glass. A quaint downtown in the state I was born. Good old Virginia. When I'm here, even after all this time, my accent creeps back in its way. What's it been, Virginia? 3, 4 years? I can't honestly say. But this is more than a nostalgic walk alongside memories I'd be better off forgetting. See, one of ours has gone rogue, is being sloppy, and I'm here to balance the scale. They're flashy, likely freshly turned, and it's these types who ruin things for the rest of us. Attention is, well, it's a drag for wranglers like Badachi and my ilk alike. And in this most symbiotic of relationships between conductor and passenger, sometimes we're sent to kill our own when they make trouble. Because trouble for Badachi means trouble for Hannah Grace and I. And those who cause trouble for my sister usually die. The less people know about us, any of it really, the better. So yeah, Virginia's all abuzz with the recent murder of a young girl. A girl found in an alley in Richmond with jagged bite marks in her neck. If she was bitten, she died before she turned. Well, that or she's screaming from within a wooden box 6 feet below the earth somewhere. Hell of a way to spend eternity, but slow turns do happen. You hear about them now and again. I bring my fingers to my throbbing temples. Another headache. I wonder if I'm coming down with something. Though that'd be a first. I'm not sure I'm subject to illness anymore. But Hannah, she's been sick. Something I never thought possible. Staying behind more and more while I hunt for the two of us. She rarely leaves the rig and is always with Prodigy. There's something that's been on the cusp of my mind lately, waiting to spill over. It calls to me. What's wrong with her? What could... And here it is again. This glimmer of some half-remembered dream. Something tangible, corporeal, and yet foreign. Hannah Grace on the bed, the room's periphery distorted so I can't make out much, but Babaji's there. He looks at me, smiles. Hannah Grace nibbles her bottom lip, opens her mouth, says, ... I guess. End scene.
I love that, though. That was a really good reading, first off, so bravo for that. But like,
thank you, I'm just winging it. I'm not well versed in actually reading aloud, so thank you.
That sounded good to me. And like the evocative nature of it all, like it's so visual. You can see it all so clearly, and I love that. Like it's really atmospheric. Like you really get the sense of what this day and the rain and everything feels like. I really love that. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. I didn't know how the reaction was going to be, but I appreciate your kindness. Even my screaming back there like, that's terrible, you know?
No, of course not. I mean, it helps that I'm really into horror, but like, I'm not going to put books onto this podcast that I'm not interested in any way, because I don't think that's helpful for anybody. Like, if people can tell as listeners that, like, no one's really into what's happening, then I don't think anything productive has happened. It's not helpful for the listeners, it's not helpful for the author, so... But yeah, I really enjoyed that.
When someone asks you for feedback on a manuscript, even if you have qualms or notes, saying it's great is actually doing them a great disservice. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe in that at all. Like, it might not be to my taste. Sure, if I'm given something to edit, I might think, yeah, this is not my cup of tea, but I'll always find the merits in it, because it wouldn't get that far without having merit, and it always does.
I agree.
Like, yes, this industry isn't a meritocracy. Even when it comes to indie pub, it's not always a meritocracy, but there has to be a pretty darn high threshold of quality for things to get places.
Oh, sure.
And also just
it's a book published every year, so yeah.
Also, asking for a friend, when's the release date of this book?
Oh, sure. So the re-release is going to be January 21st, although the ebook and paperback are currently up for pre-order. There will be an audiobook as well, which is still in the midst of being, up and available, but there will be an audiobook as well. But yeah, January 21st, and Shortwave Publishing is actually doing a kind of book box Kickstarter.
Oh, I saw that. That looked really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good idea. But Alan's really put together some cool rewards and things like that, and you can also pre-order it there directly. But yeah, January 21st is the release date, 2025.
That's really cool. So is this book box Kickstarter thing, our own unique Affliction, is going to be a part of that book box as well?
Correct, yeah, I know.
Awesome.
I think it's in the first box because it does release in January, but quarterly, I believe you'll be sent a box with certain merch, and I think you get the books before someone else. That was a weird way to say that. Before your normal person could order it, I guess you would get it in advance. I believe. Don't quote me on that. Sorry, Alan, if I'm butchering this.
But I guess it probably depends on release date, if I had to guess. So, the book boxes will go out on set dates, and if the release date of the book is after that, then you'll get it early.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way, yeah. Thanks for your help there. But, yeah, it's just a cool way to just, support an indie publisher who's really doing big things.
Yeah.
Really big things, actually. I had actually kind of lost, I love indie, but I'd kind of, with the whole DLP debacle, I kind of had lost my faith in indie for a second, but Shortwave's really reinvigorated me, and there are good presses out there, so.
Oh, there really are. There are some fantastic presses out there. I mean, there are always going to be bad eggs, I think, in just about any industry, and given, how many genuinely hundreds of indie presses there are, there's bound to be at least one or two that don't have people's best interests at heart, but it's not the majority. They're the ones you hear about because that's how social media works, but there are far, far more good indie presses than bad.
I agree. I think it was Brian Asman, if you're familiar.
Rings a bell.
He just had a werewolf novel come out. I believe it's called Good Dogs, which I haven't read yet, but the cover looks cool, so I'm definitely going to read it this year. But he was saying something to the effect of, be careful who you submit to and who you sign contracts with, because all presses are not created equal. Sometimes they're just a person with no business experience that has a KDP account, and you can do that on your own, so you just want to make sure that they're bringing stuff to really help the author, and they're well-versed in business and marketing and yada, yada, yada. But just word to the wise, just don't submit to just anybody. Really do your research, just like querying an agent. Really do your research. But yeah, Shortwave is great. I digress.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that all new presses are, not to be trusted or anything like that. There are a lot of very recent presses that are very good. So, I mean, there was one that set up very, very recently. I want to say it was called Second Realm. That's an imprint of Quill and Crow, I think, and they seem like they really know what they're doing.
Oh, cool. Good. Another I can think of is Trueborn books.
Yeah.
I think they've been around a year or so, but they're fairly new, but they are also killing it, and I can vouch for Christina. She's great. So, yeah, it's just all about the person running it, really, or the people running it, just... it's gamble to a certain point, but just talk to your writer friends too, because people are
honestly though, there's no bigger thing you can do than talk to people behind the scenes, and this is something that a lot of the new people at Shadowspark did. I actually didn't. No, I would have done this. I did it longer ago, but I didn't do it in the lead up to being signed. They contacted people who were currently in the house to ask what it was like, and I happened to know Alyssa Lausing a long time before then, and I've been talking to her a long time before, so I already had a pretty good idea and didn't really need to do that, but almost everybody that signed did that, and I think, and the co-founders said, actually, yeah, that was a really good thing to do, So like I know it can be intimidating for writers to, network and talk to these sorts of people, but generally speaking, we want to help each other. And no one's going to be angry at you for doing it. And if they are angry at you for doing it, that's a sign that you should run a mile, frankly.
Yeah. Amen. Red flags. With agents as well.
Oh, God, yes.
That certain agents get, I don't know if offended is the right word, but if you ask for references from them, how they react is very important as well. So,
Yeah, there have been stories about that lately as well.
I've heard some stories lately, trust me.
Oh boy, yes, there have. But we should digress on this one.
Yep.
And I think this is the last question I have lined up for you, is what does the future hold for your writing?
I mean, you always have, like, or at least an idea, like some ideas I do want to eventually write.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I kind of briefly mentioned before, I'm querying a consensual possession novel. Currently about to start revising the third draft of, I don't quite have a pitch nailed down just yet, but it's a Japanese ghost story. It takes place in the south of, like Southern Virginia, and it follows an OCD riddle kind of protagonist. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to, there's no bites on this current novel, to hopefully query that next year. And, I guess, I've always wanted to do a werewolf novel, so that might be a couple out, but I don't know. How about yourself?
That's really cool, though, that you have such diverse ideas. I really love that. Like meeting a writer who likes to have a sort of specialism but also play around, because that's similar to what I do. Because my first novel, Mr. Nakagami, is a political thriller, and that's coming out in May 25, so a few months after yours. But I have a whole set that I call a compendium, because I'm pretentious, of thrillers, and it's sort of like a series, but not, in the sense that altogether it forms this complete story, but they're also distinct standalone books. So you can read one book and it's a complete story, and there's no linear timeline, so that's really fun to experiment with, and they're all in like slightly different genres. So you have Mr. Nakagami, that's a political thriller, and then you have Snakebite is also a political thriller, but it's a different take on it. So Mr. Nakagami focuses a lot more on sort of human rights and law, while Snakebite is much more of the backstabbing of politics. And then there's a military thriller in there, which is the one I'm currently writing. There's a romantic thriller, which is a genre you don't seem to really see ever at the minute. And there's a captive thriller. There's a peacekeeper musical thriller. I think it's really fun to experiment. I don't like being pigeonholed. And I've ended up sort of being the thriller person, in a way. And thriller is, the most part of what I do. But I do write other things as well, and I have plans to branch out a bit in future where it's right to do so.
Sure. I mean, as long as you're having fun, you're doing the right
thing. Having fun, telling the stories you want to tell, and for me it's more just, I want to tell the story of this person, but this isn't a thriller, this is a drama, ? We'll see when we get there. I mean, I'm never quite sure of the genre of something until I really get into it, and what it really ends up being. I don't know there have been a few exceptions, so the one I'm writing at the minute is a story of a soldier fighting in a war, so I mean it's going to be a military thriller. But there are other ones where I'm like, is this a captive thriller, or is this espionage? We'll see. I don't know if you have a similar thing on that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I consider myself a quote-unquote horror writer, but I don't go in writing a story being like, this has to be horror. I just, as we kind of discussed earlier, I think you're just telling yourself the story, especially in that first or second draft even, and then later you can just evaluate, for the query letter, what genre this is or something. But I think it's best, like you said, write the story you want and then see where it falls. Don't try to fit it into. This could be bad advice. I don't know. It's just what I do. I just write the story first, worry about the genre later.
No, I absolutely agree, because I think if you try and edit something to fit a certain genre, it's too easy to lose the soul of what you're doing. And to like just end up cutting out all the best parts of the story and the most complex and interesting and characterful parts of the story. I think that very easily gets lost in those sorts of processes.
Like market, that's a way to shoot yourself in the foot, just trying to write for market, because by the time it publishes, the trend could be done,
Yeah, I actually have a whole episode of this podcast that basically says exactly that. It's like, the market moves too quickly to do that, so just don't bother. It's not worth it.
Doesn't sound very fun either.
No, I don't think it does. And I don't think you're really telling stories you want to tell if you're doing that either. And I mean, maybe if you just so happen to think, oh, this thing's trendy and I love that, then like, that's amazing. That's great if that happens. But given how specific trends are now as well, that seems incredibly unlikely to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might be doing it for, I don't know if there are right or wrong reasons, but if you're looking for money, there are tons of other way better occupations that will pay you way more.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, if you're looking for money, like, go into waste management.
Mm-hmm.
Like, seriously, that is well paying because nobody wants to do it.
Job security as well.
Yeah.
Almost like mortuary science. It's like, job security.
Mortuary science low-key like links back to the whole threat of immortality and mortality in your book, so I think I'm going to use that as a wrap. Cheers for the segue.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean, if you are a fan of horror, especially grief horror, if you liked books like Is She Dead in Your Dreams by Benjamin Langley, I will shout that book from the rooftops until my dying day, because it is amazing, then I think Our Own Unique Affliction is the book for you. It's available for pre-order now, and it is available publicly on January 21st. And I don't know the exact date of the shortwave book box release, but you might get it a little earlier if you take a look at that, so that's something you might want to look into. But for now, I guess we have to leave you with telling you where to find Scott and to learn more about this book. So where are you, Scott?
Yeah, so for the moment, I'm on Twitter. Let's see, on Instagram, of course. I do have a pretty old YouTube channel from a couple years back that I am looking to kind of reinvigorate, restart. So I have 2 videos there, but I'm not really active just yet. So mainly Twitter and Instagram for the moment.
And you're Scott J. Moses, is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah. It's Scott J. and then underscore Moses. Someone had swiped the non-underscore version. So.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. And we talked a bit before recording this episode that you were going to record a little short story reading for your YouTube channel. That's something you're looking at doing. So it's spooky season, Halloween. This will probably go out after all this is over. But if you're in mourning of the loss of spooky season, you probably want to check that out. And if you're looking for me elsewhere, I am pretty much everywhere at this point. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on Pinterest as well as on YouTube. I'm either JadeBlack21 or Jade_Black21. You'll probably see me before you finish typing out the full thing. Same profile picture everywhere, so come and join me wherever I am and see what I'm doing. I don't know half the time what I'm doing. And I think that's about that. If you are also an indie or self-pub writer and you would like to be published, please get in touch. I'd love to be a part of your journey. My email is on the screen. But that is about that. Thanks so much for coming on, Scott. This has been great. I've really had a great time talking about this book. I think this is really exciting.
Yeah, well, thanks again for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure talking with you as well, and we seem fairly like-minded, so just like chatting with an old friend almost.
Yeah, we do. We have a lot in common about things we like to write, things we like to read, our approaches, and I think that's really cool.
I agree. Really enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed having you on, so thanks a lot.
Well, thanks. Take care.
And you. And to the listeners at home, may you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a like. It helps the channel a lot. Intro and outro music by me. Copyright J Black 2024.